Hey YouTube, it's about that time we get back on the IS430 project. I know I've been posting a lot about the MR2 and its woes and what's going on with it, and the old Link commercial, which was quite awesome. But it is time to get back on the IS430, get this motor into the IS300 and get it running. I apologize for the fan in the background. I tried to do this video without the fan and just wasn't happening. It's pretty hot here in North Carolina, so we're just gonna do it with the fan and hope you can hear it, and if you can't, that happens. So I wanted to do an overview video before I get the engine into the car. I'm gonna separate it into two different videos, do an overview of the engine, transmission, and then do an overview of all the things that I did to the chassis to prepare it for the swap. So, you know, I mean, obviously I have individual videos on the transmission, on the separate parts of the things that we've done with the engine, but this overview will kind of hopefully pique your interest if you're looking to do the swap, or two, maybe you're looking for information about the swap and you hear me glaze over a quick detail and you're like, oh, I need to find out more about that, and it helps you kind of go down the rabbit hole about finding the solution to that problem somewhere else in my videos, or maybe somewhere else. And I'll kind of try to give the resources for the knowledge that I have as I go through it, and then give some credit at the end where credit is due to helping me get through this swap. I will admit that it's been a little bit more than I thought it was going to be, and a lot of that is because I was kind of made it a little bit more difficult than it needed to be, which we'll go through that as we go. So first off, the 3UZ engine. I know there's some parts that maybe be confusing to why you might not think that this is a 3UZ. We'll talk about that, but this is a 3UZ engine. Came from Yoda Auto Parts Online, which is a fantastic company out in California, I believe, that does all auto salvage Toyota parts. Really, really great people, were great to work with, got me all the used parts that I needed, put it all onto a pallet and shipped it all the way out to me in North Carolina, and it was an absolutely beautiful engine. I mean, it was already in great shape. I could have used it as it was. I think it had 97,000 miles on it, which was fantastic. I could have definitely just popped it in and probably ran it for quite some time and not had any issues, but the thought was is it was already out, so let's do some things and make sure we don't have any problems moving forward, and then also give it a little bit of special treatment to make it, you know, a little bit different than just a normal swap. So yeah, 3UZ came from them, Yoda Auto Parts. They're awesome, so definitely hit them up. Anytime I need a Toyota motor, I'm definitely going back to them. So let's start inside and move ourselves outward. So what did I replace? Even though I didn't need to, could have gone for a good bit of time, I did a whole gasket kit. I figured it's out, let's do a gasket kit. You know, I know most people would say, hey, if it wasn't leaking and everything was good, then why not just leave it and then, you know, wait later on and then do the gasket. Well, you know, I really didn't have any previous knowledge of this engine. It looked to be in beautiful condition and was super clean, but we all know that, you know, we just don't know. We don't know what the previous owners were like. So could have been, you know, a drifter, or it could have been a grandma, and we really have no idea. You know, either one could have treated it nicely or poorly. So yeah, I did a full Gates kit on it, gasket kit, replaced all the gaskets, and then also did a water pump because I just figured that made sense, so I went ahead and replaced that. I also got a alternator and went with a fresh alternator, so, you know, again, cancel out any of those problems that I may have had. But any of the things that I didn't have, like a condenser or or the power steering pump, things like that, they were all ended up provided to me from Yoda Auto Parts, which was really, really awesome. So that made a big difference. So what else we got? Let's go to all of the AN fittings. So that was something that obviously drew this out a little bit, made some things complicated. So got some AN fittings. All my AN fittings are from Treadstone Performance. A great online resource to, you know, custom builds, because you can get a lot of bungs and fittings and things of that nature. So did the large 20 AN bungs on the water outlets for the radiator, as you can see there. Let's see what else. Oh yeah, and then for the power steering pump, did a custom welded AN bung here. And then this is just a regular AN fitting over here. Again, you know, sorry I don't have all these sizes available, but I will come back later on and do a video that has like all the super details. Right now it's just quick overview, let you know what I did, and then that way you'll be like, oh shoot, I could do that too. Over here I believe that there was some sort of fitting that I had to cut off and cap off, so I did that there. Let's see, other AN fittings. Oh, on the crankcase, so AN fitting on the valve covers. I'm still working on that system now, but I'm basically going to have it Y into one and then come to the outside and go to our catch can, which I'll talk about that in the next video because the catch can's attached to the chassis. But as far as AN fittings, I believe that's pretty much everything. So, fuel fitting. Boom. Forgot about that guy right there. So, another weld-on fitting from Treadstone Performance. So all of these things, you know, you guys may ask, well, who does your welding? Well, the welder I talk about all the time is right across the street from me. I think they're listed on Google as Chrome Finishing, or It's Finished Chrome Finishing, but they also go by Vic's Auto Body, and Vic is the man over there and helps me out. You know, I'm not 100% sure if he does the welds or if the other people there do the welds for him, but I'm always super appreciative. He gives me a great deal. I just walk over there with a whole bunch of fittings and I'm like, here, weld these, please, you know? And then he takes them and welds them all up. And we're gonna talk about him a lot because any welding that was done on this, or really on that too, were all done by Vic across the street at Vic's Auto Body. So he's just a great guy. Makes life really easy when you've got someone like that I can literally walk across the street to. So that brings us to the throttle body. The throttle body, this is where things start to get unique. So it's a 3UZ. I said it's a 3UZ, yet that is a 1UZ throttle body. Why? Well, that's going to go into a lot of the transmission details and why we did what we did for this entire build. But let's back into that. So yes, 1UZ throttle body. Let's talk about the throttle body first. Got a really cool thing here. This right here is from Fish Racing. This is a 3D print file that they had. I ended up noticing that in one of their Instagram posts, they had this, and I mean, it's quite obvious that it didn't have the VCS or whatever you call this stuff that's on the side there. And I was like, oh, interesting. I was like, did you have to do anything special to run that other than just go cable throttle body? And they were like, no. So I was like, well, let's do that. Let's take the drag off all this and print that out. Super nice. And I'm working with a printer who's going to be doing a lot of printing work, rapid prototype work. There's a lot of stuff that I can't wait to show. If you've been looking at my Instagram, you know about a lot of this stuff, but I can't wait to release his company's name. He's trying to get into the automotive scene with rapid prototyping and also even making parts, printing parts that's heat resistant. So this is a really cool thing that he printed out of carbon fiber nylon, and it has that wrinkle finish that I painted, you know, a lot of my stuff in, which is really cool. So, you know, it just ends up cleaning up this area. It looks nice. And it also takes the mechanical drag off the entire system because I removed the gears that were inside of there. So we'll see if the stock ECU freaks out and even allows it or not. I'll report back on that and let you know. I'm sure you guys will tell me whether you think it'll work or not. But on this side, I've got a drift motion throttle lock on the inside of here. So you'll notice as soon as I start to turn, I can turn the throttle and it opens up all the way. Again, some people have reported that gives the ECU quite a hiccup and doesn't like it, but you know, I'm gonna run it anyway and see what happens, and I'll let you guys know. But I really like having that one-to-one throttle and kind of going from there. I know I'll have to adjust some things, like, you know, possibly for colder temperatures and make sure it runs right, but you know what, again, that's just all a part of having a car. I'm okay with doing that. So, you know, so that's a lot of things I've done to the throttle body, and as you've noticed, I've even done an HD clamp. HD clamp setup, and yes, this is one of the cheaper HD clamps, but you know, it's not boosted, so I figured it'd be fine. Works for my custom intake. This is my custom intake. Again, another drift motion piece right here, and then again, more fittings from Treadstone Performance, HD clamps from Etman, just because they were super cheap, to be honest. And then this big old honking intake right here. So this is a velocity stack intake. So this is about a 6-inch cone, but it has a stacked on the inside portion where it's going to kind of, you know, draw the air in and allow it to flow a lot quicker. So I'm just hoping, you know, bigger filter, more noise, why not? Give it a try. I know that that will be a hot air filter unless I do something about it, but I'm definitely going to be making a box inside of it, and that's why I have this nice little flange on there, is because this will mount to the side of the metal of the intake box and allow it to kind of flex inside of there a little bit, but also seal it off to make sure cold air stays in and comes in through the front of the car. So that's that. So there's the intake, and again, that's got AN fittings, Treadstone. It's going to go back into everything else and allow me to have a nice little clean system there. So I think that kind of takes care of the engine. Oh, a few more bits. So obviously have a beautiful powder coating job. I've never had any powder coating done on anything. I mean, this engine is well advanced as far as niceties and professionalism versus the MR2. And I'm sorry, MR2, I don't mean to talk about you poorly like that, but what I mean is I kind of stepped up my game, so to speak, I guess, as far as kind of finishing off this engine. I plan on doing the same sort of things to that engine when I pull it next and getting it nice. But I wanted to do something to make this a little bit different, even though it is kind of a little bit of an OEM swap, minus the exhaust and the cool exhaust that I'm going to run. You can kind of see a little foreshadowing there of the exhaust that I'm going to run there, you know, with the intake and stuff like that. But, you know, realistically, internals, it's fairly stock and it's just an NA motor, so I wanted to make things a little bit nicer. But lastly, I think one of the important things to talk about are the headers. So you'll notice these are bashed up pretty good, and they've been rewelded several times. These were OBX headers for, I want to say, IS430. On the passenger side, let's roll over to the passenger side. They were absolutely amazing. Fit just like they were. Everything was great. All I did was have, I cut off the normal flange, 3-bolt flange, welded on this high flow Flowmaster cat, really high flow performance cat, and then welded on, had Vic weld on the clamps. And now all of a sudden, and again, these were from Treadstone as well. And the cool thing about these clamps actually is that I was looking for a cost-effective solution, and you know, Treadstone's got really nice stuff. So sometimes it's not the cheapest stuff, but you don't want the cheapest stuff. You want nice stuff. But anyway, I looked inside of their what do they have? Like a clearance bin online, and found just enough clamps to do my entire exhaust system on there. They were like 50% off. I was so happy with myself. So I ended up getting all the clamps that I needed at once from their clearance bin. So make sure you're checking clearance bins of the sites that you like, especially Treadstones. A lot of awesome stuff goes up for clearance. But anyway, on this side it was a whole different story. You'll notice I had to really bang in these pipes on this side. And most of you would be like, didn't you close it off a lot? Really, I did not. It opened up, it didn't close off, meaning, you know, it expands as I push this way, so the size is generally the same, the shape's just changed, how it's merged is slightly changed. But the reason why you see some welds here is because I actually pie cut out the bottom side of it, so that way I could kind of swing it closer to the engine. You'll see on this side how close it is to the engine in transmission versus that side. So I cut open the bottom, banged it in as close as I could to get it as close to this as I possibly can without it touching. It's not touching, got a little bit of room too. And still, I hit my max when I started getting close to that bolt right there. And you know, started getting close to all this stuff over here. So then I still had to make some allowance on this side. So yeah, I mean, not the prettiest thing in the world, but you know, it's gonna be under the car. These are gonna flow way better than the stock headers anyway. So again, high flow cat, Flowmaster on this side, and that'll work its way into an X pipe, and that X pipe's going to go to a Y pipe, and that Y pipe's going to go to a side exit exhaust, but we'll talk about that in the future. So let's see, last things on the engine before we move to the transmission. So as far as the AC goes, I definitely want to have working AC. So what we ended up doing with the AC is, I believe these are GS400 lines, and this is an SC430 line. So SC430 here, and then GS400 inside of the car to be able to make sure that it all fit together This line right here, I believe, was either, I think it was the stock SC430 line that came with it. You can just see that it's kind of bent a little bit crazy. You just have to bend it out of the way so that way it can get to the outside of the belt right here, and then everything ends up working out well there too. So, you know, well, it's all OEM stuff. You just gotta kind of twerk it a little bit, if you know what I mean, and then everything ends up working out, which is nice versus getting custom stuff. Even though I may have went custom in other areas, it's not necessary for an AC line. So lastly, before we talk about the transmission, would be the wiring harness. A lot of people have asked me about the wiring harness, and it is quite nice. It's worked quite well, and it has to be quite special for what I need. So what I wanted was an A650E transmission, because later on I'm going to go DCT. So A650E is a very inexpensive button paddle shifted transmission that works well with this transmission, is easily available and rather inexpensive, right? So before we start to talk about the transmission, why I'm talking about that is because the wiring harness had to be very specific to be able to work with the transmission. We've discussed this before, so I'm going to quickly glaze over it. But 3UZ with basically 1UZ electronics, ECU, throttle body, and individual sensors. The coil packs are 3UZ, so all of that had to be individually wired by my wiring guy, who's an awesome local guy who worked very hard to get this wiring harness done. Unfortunately, it doesn't sound like he wants to do wiring harnesses moving in the future, so I'm not really going to give out his name or information because he doesn't want to take on that sort of work. If he does in the future, I'll gladly edit this video, put his information in, tag him and everything, and make sure people know where to get it from, because it is quite a nice wiring harness and does everything that it needs to do. Very tidy. Everything plugged up extremely well. So I think that's a wrap up on the engine. I still have some airlines to do, as you can see, and a few things to finish up, but I'm actually going to finish that up once it's in the engine bay, because it'll be easier to make sure that all of the line lengths are correct. So let's talk about the transmission. All right, transmission time. So a lot of this has been done because of the transmission, and most people would be like, why? It seems like a lot of work just to be able to get not the best transmission in the world, and I get that, but it's actually easier than anything else. Meaning, I would have had to have probably gone like super custom wiring harness and a custom ECU by now for any other setup, whereas the A650E will get ran with paddle shifters from the 1UZ ECU from the factory. So even though I had to get a custom wiring harness, I can adapt that wiring harness to any ECU in the future now that I have it. But now that it works for the A650E, I can utilize a very inexpensive transmission to move forward and still get my paddle shifting kicks. All right. So what did I do to the transmission and why? Well, this is a V8 IS430 transmission, but it has the internals that are necessary to be able to adapt to this end snout that's for the IS300, so I didn't have to get a custom drive shaft. So all of that was to not get a custom drive shaft. So this shoots right in, bolts right up, slides right on the drive shaft that was already on the IS300 without an issue. What else have I done? One, I did a little bit of polyurethane fill on the transmission bracket. You know, I didn't want it too stiff, but at the same time it looked a little weak, so I made sure to kind of fill it in from all areas. If you haven't ever heard of that trick, it's just window weld, 3M window weld, and you can fill OEM mounts to make them a little bit stronger. I would say that it kind of duplicates maybe like an 80 on the hardness scale, 80 to 90, so it's not super stiff. It's not going to cause a ton of vibrations, but it's still going to be a little bit more, I don't know, performance, a little bit more stiff than your stock one. So again, lovely wiring harness coming off of that. Now, a few things with the transmission is that inside of here is also a V8 torque converter and also a V8 flywheel. The important thing about that is that in videos before, you've probably seen that I had some issue being able to get this to mate up. and that was simply due to the fact that I was utilizing the wrong torque converter flywheel combination, or sorry, starter ring, not flywheel, torque converter and starter ring combination. They will look identical, but the depths of the actual like shaft on the converter and the depth of the the basin or the bowl of the starter ring will be slightly different. If you put it all together and you're having issues and it's super tight, don't be an idiot like I was and start trying to force it. Know that it should go on rather easy. Some people say that it's hard. It's not. Like when I got the right combination, it just clink, 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 and everything went on perfectly and everything bolted up well. So I would suggest that if you're having any issues at all when you put your your starter ring and your torque converter, I'm used to manual transmissions and stuff, you put that stuff on and you're having any sort of problem, stop for a second, resource some stuff, and figure out what's going wrong. So I did go the hard route as far as the transmission. As many of you have seen in previous videos, I resourced TTS Transmission, which is a local transmission shop that did all the work on this while I helped. It was super, super awesome in allowing me their shop time to help out with the MR2, this lady, and with this. But so what we did was basically we took it entirely apart and replaced it with the V8 parts, and then made sure that we had the IS300 tail shaft, which is one of the harder routes to go. But again, it retains the stock drive shaft and makes everything work fairly easy there. I would say it's the hardest route, but it's also the most cost-effective if you happen to have a spare V8 transmission and the IS300 transmission A650E at the same time. So yeah, so it's got some great internal bits in there, V8 internal bits, and it's a little bit stronger. The other thing that we did was upgrade the valve body. We've got the Transgo kit, which you've seen in previous videos, and then we also shimmed the valves to increase the line pressure to make some harder shifts. We also turned that knob up to the third dial to help also increase the pressure for those lines too, and kind of add some shifting capabilities. Not only that, but we added some AN fittings again. You know, nothing custom, pretty easy to go on to the stock housing without any sort of extra fittings, and goes down to our transmission cooler, which is attached to the chassis. So we'll go over that in the chassis video. So let's see if there's anything I've missed on the transmission. Oh, I guess, one last thing I have never seen anyone talk about is this little guy right here, this dipstick. So you're going to need to bend this inward towards the transmission. At one time I had it actually out here, but it did not work inside of the tunnel for the car. So you want to bend it inside of kind of this compartment between the valve cover and the intake manifold, and that'll give you a little space right there to be able to do it. I kind of had to bend it in a few different positions. It seems a little sketchy bending it, but it bends just fine. So long as you're not doing anything crazy or doing it super hard, it will bend and conform to what you need to get it to this location. Very easy to pull it from here. I just did a simple zip tie. I'm sure I'll do some sort of bracket in the future, but let's see, quick overview while I'm looking around. Line for the booster, small things that people don't talk about, but for the brake booster I definitely utilized that line. I did keep this system here because I am going to go to the charcoal canister. That's that line down there. Oh, sorry, so yeah, brake booster line, and then there's the charcoal canister line right there. I've got that one attached inside of the chassis. The throttle body, I don't have the coolant lines going through, really no need to. Custom line right here to be able to go to the power steering reservoir, which is chase bays, but we'll talk about that again when we do the chassis video. So I think that's pretty much everything. I mean, I painted the fuel rail, but that's not super particular. I think that's everything. So yeah, next video we'll talk about all of the things inside of the chassis, like changing out the throttle cable, the reservoir for the power steering, the catch can, the spacers for the engine mounts, all the different lines running under the car, steering shaft, steering rack modifications, things of that nature. All of that will be covered in the next video. But as of right now, the rest of my day entails getting this bad boy inside of the IS300. That way, I can start to working towards starting it up. So thanks again for watching. I appreciate the support as always. Things are really, really moving along now. The rest of the inside of the car is buttoned up. I ended up putting in the cluster and putting in the Dakota wiring box, and we'll talk about that next video as well. But it's buttoned up and ready to go. So once this goes in there, I just plug everything up, and then we'll get to driving. So big things coming ahead, and all IS430 content moving forward for the next 3 videos. Hope everyone's having a great week, and hope everyone's working on their projects. Don't spend too much time down. Get out there and do a little thing every day. Little thing every day gets you one step